Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic. We've had an unseasonably warm winter here in the Northeast, and I'm hoping it continues that way.
Right now, it looks like it is. I mean, we have had a little precipitation this month, but it's mostly been rain. So we've had some pretty substantial snowfalls in the past in February. But here we are. It's February 10th, and we've only had that one major one on December 1st.
It can rain all at once. I'm fine with rain because I don't have to shovel rain. So today, we're going to head back to the Success Showcase bookshelf and pull out an old favorite because it's something that's worth reviewing. And we come back to it fairly often in conversations of other topics. And this is really the book that started all other self-help books. And it's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, it is one of my all-time favorites, and it is exactly what it's all about. And the bottom line is what we're about to discuss right now. All these different things are ways that you can choose to respond to your reactions and how to handle people. And if people just printed these principles out and practiced them, this whole world would be a whole much better place. The book itself is divided up into 4 different parts. Part 1 is fundamental techniques in handling people. Part 2 is 6 ways to make people like you. Part 3 is winning people to your way of thinking. And part 4 are leadership techniques. And basically the way the book is laid out is there are short chapters for each one. And there's 3 points in part 1, 6 in part 2, and so on and so forth. So it's very, very easy to follow and print out the summaries. If you go online, you can probably just print out a summary of all these techniques that we're going to talk about today too. So going to be enjoying talking about this. And the first one is fundamental techniques in handling people. And starting right off the bat, technique number 1 is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. And there's a little caption there. If you want to gather honey, don't kick people over the beehive.
And this is something we talk about quite frequently. You know, it's about that positive mindset. You need to apply it to other people. People tend to want to criticize, but nobody wants to hear criticism. Now, criticism in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing if it's constructive. But when it's off the top of the head, it rarely is.
Yeah, and winning friends and influencing people, the bottom line is whenever you charge somebody with a criticism or something like that, the defense mechanism automatically goes up, even if the person thinks that you're right. It's just human nature.
Exactly. You don't want to hit people's triggers. Yeah. So when you focus on what they're doing right rather than what they're doing wrong, it's a much better approach. The person you're talking to appreciates it a lot more.
Yeah. And that leads us to point number 2 is giving honest and sincere appreciation. If you do that up front when you're talking to people, they are automatically going to like you and want to listen to you. So you got to appreciate the people that you're talking to because everybody is worth appreciating. And it's no secret. That's the easiest way to deal with people is to appreciate them first.
Exactly. And, you know, these principles, I mean, the book is over 100 years old already. But these principles go back even further than that. And I was actually just reading an article in Inc. magazine where they were talking about a principle put forward by Ben Franklin. And what he was talking about was when dealing with haters, you know, somebody who just can't stand you, what he was saying was show a genuine appreciation for something they're interested in. Ask them about it. When you're showing that appreciation, it becomes very difficult for them to hate you when you're sharing an interest. So these principles go back further than the book. Again, at least as far as Ben Franklin, and recent psychological studies have actually shown that these still are very valid.
Yeah, and bouncing to part two is 6 ways to make people like you. And this principle, as far as giving honest and sincere appreciation, a logical follow up to that is point number 4 under making people like you, and that's being a good listener, letting other people talk.
That's very true. When you leave an event, the person that walks out saying, "That was fantastic. I had some great conversations." 9 times out of 10, the person saying that has been talking about themselves and other people were listening and they gave him that opportunity.
And everybody loves to talk.
Yes.
So, again, this isn't rocket science. A lot of you folks
Right.
are out there saying, aha.
And bouncing back to the final principle in part one, it's arouse in the other person an eager want. You want to draw that person out. You want that person to want to be around you. And all of these principles all work together. When you appreciate that person, as in principle 2, and you can listen to that person, principle 4 in part 2, that person wants to be around you, and that's what you want to draw out.
Yeah, and the bottom line with this, there's a little caption next to this that says, "He who can do this has the whole world with him, and he who cannot walks a lonely way." And the bottom line is, people. We talk about networking and people, the art of the consumer. They only do things when they want to do them. And so, one of the best things you can possibly do is to arouse that in them. And obviously, starting with honest and sincere appreciation and listening helps you to get to that point.
And that's very important to remember, especially if you're in sales. And to be frank, we've talked about this in the point, all of us to some extent are in sales. That people don't buy on your schedule, they buy on their schedule. So you need to bring that out in them and say, "Oh, okay, yes." And so when it comes up, they have that want, they think of you.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into actually what we just talked about as far as being a good listener. But point one under 6 ways to make people like you is becoming genuinely interested in other people. When we talk about relationships, people want to have relationships. People want to hang around people that they know, like, and trust. And the bottom line is if you show interest in somebody else, they are going to like you immediately. And principle number 2 is the easiest one of the bunch, as far as I'm concerned. The easiest way to make a good first impression is just smile. Show yourself as being happy.
Right. And those go hand in hand. I mean, when you have a genuine interest in someone and they're talking, you tend to smile. And I know a lot of people will just fall back on Seinfeld going, "Oh, yes, genuine interest. I can fake that." Like, you can't fake genuine interest.
They'll see
You
right
act,
through it.
yeah, people see right through that. Uh, and I mean, it's a joke, that Seinfeld used in his show, but there are people out there that think they can fake being genuine. And it's simply not possible because it's an oxymoron. If you are being genuine, you can't fake it. That interest draws people to you because again, you're giving them the opportunity to talk about something they want to talk about, and you're showing that you're actually interested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're getting back to the listening point a lot, but point number 3, you have to do point number 4 to do this properly. And it's remember to use the other person's first name. And people, there's nothing sweeter to a person than their first name, especially with somebody that they've just met. And that really is a great way to show genuine interest in somebody. So it's something that you really, really need to do. And I have a hard time doing it myself, but if you can go and figure out a way to remember people's first names and then use them every time you talk to them, it makes a world of difference. It really shows that you're being genuinely interested.
Yes, and most of us have a hard time remembering people's names, especially when you're meeting a lot of people. But when you first meet somebody, repeat their name back to them. Use it as often as possible when you're talking to them that first time. One, they like hearing their name, but two, it helps you remember it.
Absolutely. And really, point number 5 is a logical progression on this too. And it says, talk in terms of the other person's interests. If you get them talking, obviously, if you ask them some questions to get them talking about things that they're interested in, that's a fantastic thing that you can do for them. And it makes them feel just more comfortable, more important, and so on and so forth. And again, the title of this section of 6 tips is 6 ways to make people like you. So if you talk about their interests, they are most likely to like you. And if they don't, then they're probably not the right person to be talking to in the first place.
Right. And even though this section is, 6 tips, they're all of these tips are related. You can't do one without the other. So if you're showing a genuine interest and you're smiling and you're listening to them, then it becomes second nature to talk in terms of that person's interest because, again, you're genuinely interested in it.
Yeah.
All of these things work together and they build on each other.
Yeah.
So it's not, a group of things that, I have to remember all of these things. One leads right into the other seamlessly.
Yeah. And number 6 is actually sincerely make the other people feel important, the other person feel important. And that's the culmination of these tips that we just talked about. And the bottom line is if you want somebody to like you instantly, make them feel important. And all these things do that.
Absolutely. And again, it's a natural progression. If you're showing genuine interest, if you're smiling when they talk, if you're actually listening to them, all of this works to make them feel important. And that's something that every one of us can do. The person in front of you should be the most important person to you at that moment. And when you show that to them, when they can feel that, yes, they really are important to you, they can't help but like you. They can't help but feel a connection. And that's what all of this is really about, is building connections between people.
Yeah, and building on again, part 1 is the fundamental techniques in handling people, and part 2 are 6 ways to make people like you. The logical progression is part 3, and this works in business, it works in family and friends, and so on and so forth. But this is how to win people to your way of thinking. And point number 1 is to get the best of an argument, avoid it. There's absolutely no winner to an argument. Even if somebody gets their way, both people walk away feeling bad.
That's very true. Think about social media today. When was the last time you had a political discussion on social media where you honestly converted somebody to your way of thinking? It doesn't happen. People are very set in their ways. And it's better to accept that and say, okay, you know what? We may disagree, but we have the right to disagree. And you have to respect the person having their opinion. You may never agree with that opinion, but respect the person's right to have it.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind when you are supposedly having an argument, I like to think of it as a discussion of disagreement, is point number 1 of the whole fundamental techniques of handling people, which starts with criticizing, condemning, or complaining. Don't go in with that approach where you are preconceived as far as what you're thinking about